You are live.
Good morning, everyone. This is a special oversight committee on workforce expansion and development. It is Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024 at 10:07 in the morning. So we'll begin by calling the meeting to order and welcoming everyone with introductions. So I'm Michael Marcotte. I am chair of the Socwed. I'm also state representative from Coventry and chair of House Commerce and Economic Development. Senator?
We're glad you're our chair. I'm Allison Clarkson. I am vice chair, I guess, of Socwed. And I am majority leader in the Vermont Senate, vice chair of Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, and serve on Senate Government Operations.
Good morning, Kendall Smith, Governor Scott's Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs. Do I do?
You do a lot.
That's not too long of a title. Am I?
If we can go to Jay, I think Jay is filling in for the commission.
And good morning, Jay Ramsey, Director of Workforce Development, and acting as the commissioner's proxy today since he wasn't able to be here.
Cameron
Wood, Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs for the Vermont Department of Labor.
Representative Granning.
Good morning, Representative Edie Granning from Jericho, representing Jericho and Underhill, and I am observing.
And also a member of House Commerce and Economic Development.
Bless me for that.
Adam?
Good morning, everyone. Adam Grenold, Executive Director of the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, past chair of the Statewide Development Board, and past member of Socwed, interested party today.
Thank you. Rowan?
Good morning. I'm Rowan Hawthorne. I am Principal Assistant to the Commissioner at the Department of Labor. I'm here observing and supporting. Thanks.
Rick?
Rick Sable, Office of Legislative Counsel, here to assist the committee with drafting and legislating.
Make it.
Megan Canella, Supervisor of Committee Services.
Thank you. So thank you all for joining us this morning, and thank you to the committee for putting together again. So I think we'll turn it over to Kendall, kind of give us an update of what's happening with the appointments to the new State Workforce Development Board and where they are with chair appointments possibly, and also with the ED position.
Yeah, sure. So good morning, everyone. Kendall Smith from Governor Scott's office. We are about 90-ish%, I think, through making appointments to the board, which tracks with what I was hoping I could promise last meeting about having some form motion of an update here. The governor has reviewed a compiled list of the new, I think it's like 27 or so members. I do not have that full list in front of me, and some of those notifications are still happening. So I don't, to the extent some people have not necessarily accepted or heard yet, want to create any, confusion or, inappropriate feelings. So anyway, that is going well. I assume by the time we meet, if we meet again in a month or so, since we're about 90% of the way through now, that should all be finalized, and I should be able to share like a nice list with everybody, either via email before then or in this meeting, of those folks who have agreed to serve. In terms of a chair, there is an individual, and I believe the chair has to be a business representative from those 13 or so members that we are speaking with about stepping up to do it. And it's going to be big shoes, Adam, to fill. And so since that person hasn't formally committed yet, again, I don't want to publicly name them. But Adam, when they do hopefully confirm, we might want to put them in touch with you. So you can just, if you're willing to talk to the individual for, a few minutes, of giving your perspective on the chair role, your tips and tricks, best practices, things to do, things to not do. It might be great if you would be willing to connect with them for, again, however long you're willing to give, just to say, this is what I did as chair, and these are my suggestions. Godspeed.
Happy to do that. Happy to do more than that.
Okay.
Yeah, by all means, happy to speak to the individual in advance if they want to reach out. However you want to shepherd that, I'll end.
Great. And then in terms of the executive director, I think I shared last time that we had been approaching a few different candidates that the governor was interested in having serve, but there had been barriers around, frankly, compensation, benefits being some of the big ones in terms of the people we were looking to attract. We are currently in conversations with another candidate, but because that person has not formally, again, agreed, and it's just, I apologize. I'm not trying to be evasive today. It's just where we are in the process. Feeling comfortable blasting their name out there either, for various reasons. So, if anyone wants to maybe like sidebar with me after, like happy to sidebar, but, I feel pretty hopeful. I know, that I'm tracking with where we were last month, but next month I'll be able to say, here's the board, here's the chair, and have a more concrete update that I can share with more specificity on the ED.
Questions for Kendall?
Yes, but I'm not sure I can ask them.
Sidebar. Okay. Thank you, Kendall. I did make one jump on the agenda. So is there any additions or changes that we need to make to the?
No, I just was reminded by our chair that we don't have to approve minutes because of YouTube. I had forgotten that.
What?
That-
Sorry.
that we don't have to approve minutes.
Oh.
But, you know, in judicial rules, we do. So the last meeting I chaired in here was joint judicial rules, and we do minutes. So I just,
I think you can
every
do it
committee
either
is
way.
different, clearly.
Yeah, but I checked with legislative council, checked with Tucker.
Yeah, no, it makes sense given we now have it on
I
YouTube.
think because it's recorded.
No, that's
It's optional.
no big deal. It just was amused.
So we'll continue committee discussions on a separation of duties between the Department of Labor Commissioner and the Executive Director. I know there was some, I think, Senator, you worked with Commissioner.
We had
Barrington on
a
the
very,
board with Rick.
we had a good meeting with Pam and Michael and Rick and me and Jay.
Jay, that's right.
And Jay, and then, hi, Ellen. Hi, sorry. Let's, you want to invite Ellen to the table?
Okay.
Here's a copy. Oh, is this your new draft?
So yeah, I'll clarify that once you're done.
So anyway, we met and then we have also had some further conversations. So I think we want to begin by looking at what you, so we've had input from Michael, Jay, Cam, Ellen, Allison, and Rick and Mike.
Right.
So actually, we've all had a chance to weigh in, except Kendall, actually.
And the only issue is that the document that Cameron, myself, you, Senator, the Commissioner worked on, Cameron had made some comments to that document. I didn't have that copy by the time I made my suggestion. So we'll just need to incorporate some of the work that we did during that work group meeting and the work that I'm suggesting committee consider. So that's really it.
Right.
It makes it a little bit more complicated, but I think we can figure out. There's not a whole lot. It's mostly with those questions that we had that we can address here.
And actually, I think, I just want to say, I think it's been very thoughtful and everybody's had good input. And I think we're getting to a really useful document.
Yeah.
And most of those comments were, as you mentioned, Rick, just questions that the committee had discussed last time. And I think when we met, I think we had actually gone through about half of them, and I thumbs up a lot of them just because I think we'd actually been able to kind of work through the thought of the comment.
Yeah.
So, I don't think you're missing anything, Rick. And I'm
A few. I noticed a few things, but we can figure that out here. So I'll leave it up to the chair. You want to go through the document I submitted, or
I think that's probably
Okay.
where we should.
okay?
Because that's sort of the latest draft, so that makes the most sense. And do we want to put it up on the screen so our crowd can follow, or?
Yeah, I can share my
It's
screen.
super tiny on this type.
Megan, can I share my screen?
Yeah. It just doesn't help that much because it's so tiny.
Okay.
When you do drafting, tracking, the document that
Yeah.
gets printed is dinky. We need like,
You can. So you could print without that, but it's another hit to go there and print without.
right, but it's hard to make, because they're making room for all the comments on the side, they make the type very squished. I'm gonna go get some water, check some water.
I would just add that at the meeting that
Yeah.
Senator and Clarkson, Representative Marcotte and I and Rick were at, when we met last week. We were definitely asking the question, like, how prescriptive or not.
Yes.
A lot of the comments that you had, or like for clarification, we were like, we want to be really mindful about not being too prescriptive and detailed in statute. So just to know that we were on the same page around that.
I will say as someone on the executive side, that is very helpful.
Yeah, no, clear.
Yeah. Restricted can be changed.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's so much we don't know, maybe coming down in the future. We don't want to tie hands and all that, but we also want to be as clear as possible about the intent.
I'm ready, but did you want to wait for the senator to come back?
Why don't we get started and catch up, I'm sure.
Okay, so the first page is just a cross out that hasn't changed of section 540. The bottom of page 2. There wasn't really any changes to A by either of the groups. B, I added that we should also consider the executive director as far as the powers and duties. Because there is another section which kind of lays forth those powers of the executive director. I know that the Commissioner of Labor has a bunch of other powers in Title 21. So I understand the purpose of that section of that subsection. So I just wanted to add the executive director there to ensure we're not leaving out powers. Page 3. Just changing a is to shall be for clarity, and then another shall serve as the state workforce administrator. That's the only change to the C that I made. D, and we've been talking about this, figuring out how to kind of make these similar. The Commissioner of Labor and the Executive Director, as far as what they do, their powers. And I think the introduction sentence is pretty important. So I have a suggestion, reminding the reader that we have co-leaders. So as a co-leader of workforce education and training, the Commissioner of Labor shall, in consultation or coordination, we can talk about that, but I think they should match, the two should match with the Executive Director. And then.
Yeah, and just to go a little further, I think what we were thinking was that we know that, 1 through 9 are specific to the commissioner. But by consulting with the new ED, is that ED continues to be updated on what Department of Labor is doing. Not that they wouldn't be, but I think we want to make sure that is, I think that's what we were thinking. It's not, be part of the decision, but it's making sure that executive director knows what's happening in the Department of Labor.
Same team kind of thing.
I will say Jay is the one who's been blessed as the commissioner's designee on this committee, but I understand, and if I were the commissioner, would say I personally wouldn't have any concern with it, Kendall, as long as you didn't either. I think the goal and hope is that we'll be working very closely, as we have in the past, with the executive director and this stuff.
And just confirming, to your guys' awareness, the commissioner has seen this language.
So he was copied on the email yesterday to Megan, but he may not have read
He
it.
may not have had time.
We have not walked through it.
Yeah.
No.
That's okay, we're walking through it now, so.
Yeah.
we'll have-
Well, then you
hopefully
can
have
have those
comments.
discussions. with
Yeah.
the commissioner.
We'll talk to him today about it. We'll obviously give him an update on the conversations over, but I don't think he would be concerned about this.
So subdivision 1, we've been talking about this as a group here, that related word, I just kind of typed in what I think we're all assuming there is that we're discussing workforce education and training programs operated by DOL. And that was for me, Claire, just making sure that the reader knows
Yeah,
what related is.
I was gonna be concerned if we got into a point of actually starting to list them out.
Oh, no.
Totally okay with removing that word.
that goes with Ellen's comment earlier, which is trying to keep high level and not too prescriptive all the way through for statutes.
No change to 2 or 3. It told me I underlined 3.
Just to go back to number 1 there, trying to parse out some words here. Workforce education and training is one thing, but we're also focused on employment. And so if it were
What's that?
employment and training or something like that, I think that speaks to the way that we think about what workforce development does, especially with unemployment insurance, with
Sure.
The public-
You know, your key
Yeah.
point. Let's do it alphabetically and do education, employment, and training.
So if I just one thing, we use this phrase several times in 540,
Mhm.
and I wonder every time we use this phrase, should we include employment, or is it just for that one coordination element there?
We probably should.
Because it's on. So if you go back to subsection A, when we discuss who the leaders are, we say they're leaders of workforce education.
I think, so yeah, I see what you're saying here, yeah, multiple times on the page, where I don't necessarily think about the work that we do as education. It's we're helping people get jobs and we're using training to help people get better jobs and have a career path. The colleges are focused on education, the Agency of Education is focused on education. So
But
if it were left out, would it change significantly the way that the powers and duties read?
But training is education. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
when
it
you're
is.
trained in something, that's an educational moment. So, and there are elements of education in a lot of the agency in state government employment development work. I'd keep it broad. I'd keep education, employment, and training, but I think the addition of employment is key. You're right.
Okay.
That is why you are at the table.
So add it throughout.
I think
Is
having
that
it
the
throughout
second?
is additive. What do you think? You're you have mixed feelings.
Well, I think I want to make sure that, are we providing any other trainings within what we're talking about in this section that don't have anything to do with employment? I would doubt it.
No, all of the work that we do in the workforce development division is about taking someone either who's unemployed or someone who wants to be
Underemployed.
upskilled or whatever, and
Yep.
using education and training to
Yep.
get them
Okay.
where they would like to be.
Yep.
So,
Can I ask a question?
Hmm.
That's kind of related maybe to the addition of the word employment, but a little more broad. So, just so I understand intent here, so if we go, we can see it, but the very first line that says in consultation, so the Commissioner of Labor in consultation with the ED shall do all these things. So normally, the goal and the intent, as I agree, would be that they're consulting and they're on the same page. But sometimes we can be myopic about that, and I would want to avoid, my question is, does the Commissioner of Labor basically need to get the blessing of the ED to do all of these things? And how does that create a backlog? If he has to document, I've consulted with the executive director agrees. I've consulted with the executive director agrees. Because some of the things like number 2 is very broad to other work, like entering into agreements with state agencies, like beyond the work of like just workforce. And so I might be being too myopic and reading too much into this. And then I don't know, I think we can add employment, but I don't know to the extent like the Office of Workforce Expansion and Development, whatever the office name is going to have the ability to do employment activities at the scale that the Department of Labor is. And so now I'm worried about setting up the workforce office to fail on the employment side because they're not going to be, maybe I'm overthinking it, but that's
maybe.
my, thank you. So she's like, absolutely. Well, that's good, but I just would rather call it out now than have it become like a tangle or a knot, like in a year.
I think I follow you and I have the same concerns, I think, but I think in one, when we talk about employment, that's fine because it works there. But co-leader, so the ED And that office does not have anything to do with employment. All they're there for is to make sure we have a coordinated system, talking with people, bringing people together, businesses, nonprofit, everybody. And they really aren't part of employment.
Well, actually, then it all leads to employment.
It
I mean,
leads
so-
to employment, but we want to make sure that there's a separation there of the commissioner and Department of Labor are the ones that are responsible for employment.
Mhm.
And then the ED is responsible and training.
Mhm.
Now, the ED is responsible for training and development, workforce development, bringing everybody together. So I share your thoughts on, do we want employment stuck everywhere
Or just here,
or just like?
just in number one.
Yes, and just making sure that in consultation with you guys, don't read that as like tripping you up, where the
Right.
commissioner is gonna have to document that he's consulted with the ED on every move, and then.
Right.
Hopefully they are. I'm not saying that's not the goal, but I just don't want it to become a bureaucratic mess, where then it's like, well, we can't move forward because the ED hasn't responded to me.
Yeah.
Hopefully we won't run into this, but just.
But I would see it as like the ED is out and about around the state and in a different capacity than maybe we are, and scanning, connecting with different sectors and bringing, basically problems to us to say, hey, the forest product sector is having this trouble with career pathways or employment in the Northeast Kingdom. Can we devise a strategy for how that would work? And then that's pulling in UI, that's pulling in workforce development and trying to come up with the strategy.
So maybe in that context, then you're talking about employment. So maybe it is part of the EDs.
I will echo Kendall's comment here. I mean, I do think potentially look to Rick and get your thoughts. I mean, what I can imagine is if somebody coming in, state auditor or someone else and saying, demonstrate to me how you're meeting your statutory requirements here. There are aspects on the list that I think, again, to my initial comment when I saw this, I think the commissioner would want to be coordinating, if you will, coordinating with this position. However, as we've talked in the past, among this list of duties are very prescriptive things that we have to do under WIO, for example. And I do agree with just Kendall's hypothetical thought process here of, I don't know that we want to be in a position where we're delayed in doing some of the activities on here. I don't know if the committee has that concern, so I'm validating your.
I'm just being
bringing it up
nitpicky.
and
It makes all sorts of
talking about it.
logical sense. I understand the intent. I'm on board with the intent.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of like
Well,
nitpicking
is
at the
there a
wording.
different word
No, that's what I knew. That was gonna be the next question.
Is it possible that we say with notification?
It just,
So
No.
my thought would just be, could you add,
That's another thought.
you've already hit it, Rick. I was gonna say as appropriate, or.
in consultation as appropriate would be, except, yeah, I think that's.
I think that's good.
fine.
As appropriate.
Yeah, I would say in consultation as appropriate with the executive director, and then maybe
And
that.
then just adding employment under number one. And not doing it everywhere.
Oops, sorry.
And then additional nitpicky thing, could it be employment and workforce education and training, like grouping them, that education and training go together?
Right, those two do, they do go together.
I didn't work on the language here.
I like that way you just in consult with these, like, the top part. Where appropriate, consult the executive director to. Oh, I don't know, you just said two.
Yeah, but then I have to
I don't know how to-
I have to fix this down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so you like the word appropriate?
I do, yes.
Okay. Senator? Where appropriate? Okay. Let me also get clarity on the employment and training business. Do you want this throughout or just in this line one? The co-leader, are they the co-leader of workforce education and training only, or?
I think when you link employment with training, that makes sense. When you put the comma and you're separating it out.
That's the Oxford comma. I mean, we could call it then it's called employment and training.
Because I think that's the way we talk about employment and training.
So those would be together,
So workforce, education, employment and training.
right?
Right, that's what I thought we had talked about.
Well,
The comma is kind of.
The comments.
the comment is
The
key.
comma is
separate ideas
key.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
So then I would also remove it here.
Well, I think we might want to mark this up and send it along. I don't want to derail you
Yeah,
too
okay,
much today, but
Yeah.
I think Jay was asking for it to be employment and workforce
Well,
education and training.
I think this makes sense. It was the group, like the separation of the words with the commas and removing the Oxford comma.
Gotcha.
As opposed to the Cambridge comma.
First time in committee, the Oxford commas come up, not just this committee,
Yeah,
but
it's
any
very
committee.
important.
This is fascinating stuff. That wasn't in my job.
There's a song for you that I'll play after the.
I know about it. Yes. Man, this has to be off camera, that specific song.
Actually, I ask people in interviews nowadays. like,
Really?
"Do you use Oxford commas?"
Yeah, huh?
That's a good
Sorry,
lunch.
I mean, they're actually.
Having this conversation.
Okay.
It's a good lunch council interview question.
Yes.
Can I just, I'm sorry, point of personal privilege because we're talking about it. When one of my more nerdy moments is I once during the summer in high school called my next year's English teacher to ask her if she wanted me to use Oxford commas or not, because she assigned us like a summer project. And that was how I got on her good side because she was so impressed that I had a student reach out to me over the summer just to show you what a nerd I was or annoying. To ask whether or not I will be grading using Oxford commas.
Yes, how many high school
I was on
kids
her-
we get?
On her good side for the rest of the year, but sorry. I'll just say, well, I'm like, very or annoying, too anxious, might be another word, I don't know. Can I ask you a question on number 8? Sorry, is that language that's already in statute about requiring the report?
Yes.
Okay, and it doesn't currently specify like annually or at the end of the grant period or when such a report?
I can show you the current language.
Yeah, and it's gonna connect to another.
It's maybe hard to read here, Kendall,
This
but
was a discussion amongst the committee last time we met too, because, and this is where I probably, someone just give the floor to Jay as to what is potentially needed, but we talked about we would like to get data from each of these entities that in current landscape aren't even being funded by the Department of Labor. Specifically, the biggest thing we want is, social security numbers so we can
Yeah.
match up wage history. But I'm not sure we even at this point are, going to this level of what is current on number 8. And I don't know whether that's something we would want that type of language specifically, but.
Yeah, so, and I think that the task force has had, right from the beginning, had conversations in areas like this is, do we tackle this now or do we wait for this executive director to come on and then work with you and make change and look at where changes need to be made in the statute and bring those recommendations back to us?
Well, this has to go into a bill, so we can
Right.
obviously work on this and figure it out and get it back to you during the session, but sorry, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say we already have a federal requirement for training providers that are serving people who are funded with federal funds to report. So this would just be kind of mirroring that. I think I would just say we could put this in here. This would at least give us a base reason to ask for businesses to
Request it.
provide that
right.
information now, and then when the trust eventually gets set up, then we
Right.
come back and revise this.
So the key for, I think, many of us is trying to get as much data in as few reports as possible. So that we reduce the number of reports, but we improve the quality of them and the data that's presented and the recommendations in them as a result. So, and it kind of is treading the line of the date of our Mistress Ordway's recommendation to have our whole separate agency of data. We just have to be actually asking for it at every opportunity. And I think this gives us hopefully an opportunity to work further on this, but at least anyway, we thought this was the best we could do at the moment, but always open to
Answer your question, Kendall, I think it depends on the funds that we give out.
Right.
I
So
think
it's at the end of the
sometimes
grant
we ask
period,
for,
once a year.
sometimes we ask for more narrative,
Yeah.
depending on the training, sometimes it's just
It's all in the grant.
data for us to report our
Right.
federal performance
Federal.
measures.
But we need, kind of need both, because we need the story and we need the data that backs it up. But not exhaustive narrative, but
Well, state, and here, state funding captures both state tax dollars and federal funding that flow through, I'm assuming.
You had the question last time, and I think the answer was yes, but
So, sorry, the question was,
So when we talk about programs that receive state funding, so state funding
Mhm.
is either state tax dollars or federal tax dollars, right? Because, yeah, I mean,
if also.
you already have a requirement through WIOA that you have to gather this information. We're just saying.
correct. Yeah, so there's two ways grant funds can support an individual, and when we're supporting the individual, we already have this
You have the
information,
system.
but when we give a grant to a
and
training provider or a business,
Mhm.
they have to provide it to us in a different way because our system isn't set up for them to report it to us, like in a secure system. So it's a little bit more complicated.
So there's and I think if we move on, we're going to see when we have this CD on board is to look at language throughout, not just DOL, but throughout. Make sure that we're replicating language, because I don't know that this language is this in ACCD for Vermont Training Program? Is this in AHS? I mean, in ANR, where the dollars for serve, learn, and earn flow that requires them to provide this as well. So,
but
because
it's
that's been something that we've been pushing on.
Yeah.
Serve, learn, and earn is bring us the data back. Because you're asking for a considerable amount of money. We don't have the data, how can we?
right. So
And so,
it's
yeah.
beginning to unify
Right.
and make consistent data across different entities and across different departments.
Just drop something like that into the big bill, and would that
Wouldn't that be
expand
great?
the enterprise?
Well,
Like that language about.
that'd be an annual
requirements?
thing. That'd be an annual thing, though, right? We'd have to have it.
Management and session knowledge time,
Yeah.
or
Really?
If it's in the big bill, it would be every year. You'd have to make sure that language is in there.
So I think if we have it in here, in theory, it gives us the legal authority to go.
go.
Ask for it.
But
Yeah, but
It's not something we've done and have the infrastructure to do, right? We don't go to the commissioner of A&R, the secretary, and say,
you must have this in your grant
So
agreement.
this is all state funding. It's not just funding provided by DOL. That correct what we're saying.
yes, sir. And that's what I'm saying. It's just, it's something we need to build out the infrastructure for if we're going to do it, but I think having
We have
it
to start
here gives us that broad authority.
Absolutely. And I think later we reference the chief performance officer. I mean, this just ties into all our goals and objectives, and how can we even begin to know how we're performing if we don't collect it all?
Ellen?
Yeah, and my understanding of this subsection here is that this is the mechanics of collecting the data.
Right.
It doesn't indicate what data should be collected, right? It doesn't set up the agreements across all agencies and departments about, well, what are good metrics, right? This is just literally like, you shall give us the money or the data.
For the money we can.
Exactly.
Outcomes for cash.
If I just could suggest language that might assist in this, number 8 would be something like, and any other information deemed necessary by the commissioner. Because then that allows us to change, we could add things or remove things without going back into the statute to try to fix it.
If WIOA needed more, or you mean something in your bailiwick? in
Well, yeah,
particular?
something, if we realize we're producing,
Any other information related to their outcomes on their training.
yes, yes.
Yes,
in that.
that's a simple phrase, like, and any other information to the commissioner deems
Okay.
necessary.
But yeah, for the state funded grant purposes, just to say, we round one, we need social security number of all the participants and we want to know what training it was and et cetera, et cetera. And then a year later, we realize, oh, we're missing something. We need to require them to submit this other piece of information that the commissioner would have the authority to do that for this limited purpose.
And the executive director would want that also because that's part of what they're coordinating.
And it would help, potentially could help to replicate in other programs where the executive director may have some insight that we don't.
I mean, Jada, why isn't it not sufficiently broad as it is? So you may require them to give us a report that evaluates their results. Like in the example you just gave, that you could go back and say, to better evaluate your results for the statute, we now need dosage, number of hours that I don't know, like if it wasn't on the initial report.
I think the way that this is worded is not specific enough for us to, let's just say we're in a debate with a grantee business about what data we should collect. And we point to this and they say, that doesn't say that you can collect, that the commissioner has the authority to ask me for social security numbers.
Read it in conjunction with 9 though, Jay.
Okay.
So we can require under 9 socials.
Right.
If that's your
Okay.
primary
Right.
concern. I'm not opposed to you adding the additional information piece because I don't know what we would potentially need or want to collect, but the social piece, I think we're covered under the sub.
You're right. I retract my.
So no, any other information? Okay.
Making progress.
Okay, anything else on 8 or 9 now?
No, I think we're slouching ahead here.
Hit the resolve button. Okay, so E, I mentioned earlier that I think E and D should match as far as the verbiage on consultation, coordination, whatever we call it. So we say again, as a co-leader of workforce education, employment and training in the state, the ED shall, in coordination with the Commissioner of Labor and the State Workforce Development Board. So I'm keeping that language there. But adding that first phrase and
Okay.
the word coordination is consultation in D or consult with. So I think they should match, but it's up to you all what you think is best here.
I thought we made them match now. I thought you had done that.
I think there was debate about whether to use coordination or consultation, but whichever word we use, I think it's consult. We should use consult here as well.
I think consult is the.
I think consult is great. I mean, it doesn't. I would add. In coordination, what you're recommending is in coordination and consultation?
No, just shall, consult with the Commissioner of Labor and the State Workforce Development Board.
What was the verbiage we used in?
As appropriate,
As
Where
appropriate.
appropriate, yep.
where appropriate,
Yep.
shall consult.
Yeah, I would make them match and I would add appropriate if everybody's feeling that needs to be added.
Okay.
Ellen and Adam, Adam, we haven't heard from you, so I'm hoping if you have thoughts, you'll share them.
I'm tracking this conversation and don't have any outside or additional comments.
Likewise with.
Yeah,
you,
Edie too.
Edie as well.
Same page as Adam.
Okay.
It's always nice to be on the same page as Adam. I think that's a
Good place to
good
be.
place to be.
I agree.
I want to be on.
All right, so
Real quick, just a wording thing, you'll get this later when you review it, but after board there, I think you're gonna need some sort of action verb.
Two.
Shall.
So, yep. Thank you, Cameron. All right, so one. I don't think I had any suggested changes here.
Just the
Cameron?
added and man.
I think
Well, that
that was something we added
Yeah.
last time, so I just highlighted it because we were adding it, so I don't think there was any discussion on it, and I don't.
Okay.
Refer to Kendall if she has any concern.
I think our first changes are in where we eliminated a couple and incorporated in three a bunch. So it's the first change.
Okay, yes, so three, there's some weird numbering here, so follow me if you can. Added the phrase in order to at the end of three, and then A, annually assess the effectiveness of the workforce development system. This is new language that I'm suggesting. B, ensure coordination and non-duplication of workforce education and training activities. That hasn't changed, but I would add the word employment here to match.
Yep, good.
I'll go through this again to make sure I don't miss anything. And C, identify best practices and gaps in delivery of workforce education, employment and training.
So the purpose of the rework on A, B, and C was to say, well, what is the purpose of creating and maintaining an inventory?
That's what I was
To
just thinking.
do-
Yeah.
Think of it going.
It wasn't to make it look confusing, it was to add some order.
Yeah,
Organization here.
yeah, yeah.
And we added A. A is in that kind of fit into under three, so that's we decided to kind of create B and C there as well.
One, under A, so there's two ideas I'm tracking. One is a discussion that we had about the reporting.
Right.
So if we're doing a biennial report, that's 2 years. That language should match 3A, that it's not annually assessing, it's.
Annually,
Biannually assessing.
yeah.
But is this?
Why wouldn't you annually assess what's going on? It's not, we're not asking you to annually give a report. We're asking you biannually to give us a report, but shouldn't you be assessing what's going on every year? So that if there could be changes.
Every day. You wake up.
Well, I mean, we have COVID happen and look what happened to employment and training and develop, I mean, it all crashed. So the, and yeah, things change fast sometimes in employment and training and that entire world. But
We just took out annually and just says assess. You shall assess the effectiveness. That,
Or continually.
Because again,
Yeah, but then-
I think you
then
have
could
to-
have an ED that hasn't done anything in 5 years and.
yeah, you
so
need to
didn't
have,
Tell me when you wanted it.
but if you're not asking for a report, how are you
we're
ensuring?
not
it's
asking for,
annually?
we're just asking
So
them
how
to
are you?
annually be on top of that. Well, annually, they're gonna have to be able to come to the legislature every January and say, this is sort of where we are, these are what our needs are. And this is why we are asking. And I think that really does require, that is a kind of natural point at which you are saying, here's where we are, here's what we need, and this is why we need it.
Actually agree with Kendall on the point. I would potentially remove it. And my point back to you, Mr. Chair, would be you have the right to drag them into your committee and ask them what they're doing.
Right.
But
How are you assessing the effectiveness of the
Yeah, that's
workforce
true.
system?
Well, the governor does too,
Yes,
right?
right.
But I would push back and say, if you don't make that an expectation, that will be an annual thing. I mean, it's a naturally annual thing to have happen either as the budget is being
Mhm.
prepared and he has to come to the governor and your staff.
Right.
And annually when he has to get the money from the legislature, he or she has to. So I don't think annually is a bad thing. It's not a report. It's just annually coming to us and justifying your budget and or justifying the changes they're asking for.
To be clear, I'm okay with annually staying in, just if we were heading down a rabbit hole of like biannually, annually, 6 months, 3 years, I was like, they should be doing it every day. So,
No.
Yeah.
right, like,
The
can we
biannual-
just say that they should be, that was where I was coming from, but I'm not gonna, if it pleases everyone, I'm not
Well,
I'm
we
fine
could
with
change
annually.
Annually to daily.
staying up. Yes.
But the plus is increasing.
24/7.
24/7.
You know, like the ticker tape in Times Square about the debt. You're being, it's like the same
Well,
ticker
but
tape
you could
around.
also say, you know, at least annually.
Mhm.
So that's your,
No, I think that I'm with everyone here too. I think it's just a valuable
Mhm.
discussion point to say,
you're right.
here's, are we?
and don't forget, if something pops up, once we've completed our work here and push it to the committees, there is still the opportunity to make those changes in committees.
Absolutely, but I think, I think on the reporting front, it's really great to have better reports. But biannually at the beginning of a biennium, which is what I think we have with the basic needs budget, we now have with a bunch of things. The property value and review report is a biennial one, a ton of our things are now biannual, and I think that the reporting piece now fits into that sort of mode and makes, I hope, it easier for everybody, but we will, just there's so much that's annually expected in terms of the budget and the legislature and the governor that it makes sense to keep that.
Adam's also raised his hand. Just
Oh, yes, yes,
You guys
no,
can't see it, but I referred to,
How can you see it?
because I'm sharing my screen, I guess,
Oh,
yeah.
you clever creature, you.
Thank you. Yeah, I wonder if this would be an opportunity to also insert something about the investment. So annually assess the investments and the effectiveness of the workforce development. So nowhere in here are we referencing
Yeah.
the
Good
ROI,
point.
the amount in and what's coming out.
Yes, yes, good point. Thank you for that. Where do you see that going, Rick?
Well, right before, annually assess the investments and effectiveness. Adam, wasn't that your suggestion?
Yeah, yep, you got it right in there. Yep.
Allison, it's up there.
Yeah, it's already,
Oh, you're just waiting. Wait, so investment is up there and I just don't see it.
I just put it there.
Oh, good.
yeah.
Right. Ah, there it is. Perfect.
So this is the executive director assessing the investments across all of
Yeah.
the system.
What's worth it and what's not?
Cameron?
My question was gonna be on the sub B there, and I understand it's current language, so forgive me, and if I'm nitpicking too, you will collectively tell me, don't worry about it. This is non-duplication. And I just, so we're creating the inventory in order to ensure coordination and non-duplication of activities.
Correct.
And well, where my head went was, are we somehow disincentivizing competition, if you will? And what I mean by that is Jay runs a training program and I come out and I'm like, I can run a training program doing the same thing, but I can do it better. And now we're disincentivizing that opportunity because it's becoming a duplicative offering, if you will. And so it's current language, so I don't know that it's a problem currently. I don't think we're not going to people and saying, sorry, somebody down the street's already doing that, but I just, again,
Well, I
sharing it
think
for
we
my
need to
thoughts.
we get stuck with the duplication because we don't know where everything is. So quite honestly, we have in the past funded things that were duplicative. So or programs, and this is where programs that could incorporate aspects of what's being proposed and make them better instead of creating a whole new program. I'm going to channel Jane Kitchell for a moment. No new programs. And let's make the ones we have better. And so in this, I think we have the opportunity of assessing what we have, figure out how we can make them better, incorporate maybe some, but if there's something that is better and could be run better, I don't see that there's any reason that couldn't happen here. That I don't know.
Does changing it to ensure coordination and intentional duplication change the
Intentional non-duplication or? You're saying.
Intentional
Make it-
duplication.
Intentional duplication.
I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
I would leave it as it is, and I think if there's a problem, I think that's the job of the commissioner and the executive director to say, look, we think actually this could be done better. You know, and there's always opportunity for people to come to the commissioner and the executive director and say, look, we can do this better. And propose something, and then they can incorporate it in a proposal.
Well,
In its current language, I'm not saying I think it's an issue.
Yeah, I
but
don't-
are there times when there are programs that are under WIOA that are providing workforce training that an outside entity could also provide to people that are outside of WIOA? So that I mean, if you look at it strictly, there's a duplication there, but
Well, it's
I guess, but yeah.
I think it's fine
maybe we're
probably
over.
to leave it the way that it is, because it hasn't created any
Created a
problems
problem.
thus far.
I would, I agree. I don't.
I think that we want to make sure that we're leaving enough leeway for the commissioner and the ED to be able to say,
Yes.
well, this makes sense to have this entity outside of state government doing this as well.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it. What I am worried about is duplication.
Yeah,
Okay, we have C. Again, current language, just added the word employment to keep it all the same there.
Right?
So the new 4 is, again, current language, established goals for the integrated workforce education, employment and training. This is everywhere. New 5, this is new language that we're adding in at the beginning of it. So in consultation with the chief performance officer, design, implement consistent set of metrics in order to evaluate the effectiveness of all workforce development programs.
Can we, tacking on to that, maybe it's another individual bullet, but can we add something that, and it relates to number 10 as well, in terms of supporting the board, that they also should update the board's or the office's strategic plan every so often? Whether that's every 2 years or evaluate, update the strategic plan of the board.
I'd say, I agree on a 4-year cycle that coincides with
Yeah,
estate plans that
Yes.
are,
let's make
Okay.
those things
Mhm.
consistent.
I'm not tied to any, I just would like some acknowledgement of like, having a strategic plan and keeping it current
Yeah.
and relevant, but I'm not, that's my thought.
You want that here?
I don't know. This is what made me think of it, but then also in
Okay.
terms of number 10, because last time, when we had Tori do it, it was like a board activity with the chair, Adam can weigh into, but so whether it's its own bullet or we somehow tack it on to 7 or 10, those were what immediately jumped out to me as maybe.
You're talking about new 10 right at the very bottom?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, and it's more than just, like, the WIOA plan, we've always been talking about, we need to have a more comprehensive strategic plan for workforce development that's broader than WIOA. So, but it makes sense to have the WIOA consistent component of that strategic plan be on that 4-year cycle.
Right.
But we don't want to in any way signal that there's a limitation
Right.
to only being WIOA related.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here in case you can't see my hand. I think we had the WIO plan, which is very prescriptive, must be done, needs to follow, needs all the different departments and agencies that touch its input. And then this past year, as Kendall referenced with Tori leading the strategic plan, that was a process that was very specific to the administration strategic plan for the workforce. It didn't bring in the outside parties, so there may be an opportunity in the future that meshes those two efforts. So you have a strategic plan for the administration, and then if the board and executive director build a coalition as envisioned, I would think the opportunity is to build a strategic plan that brings in multiple different partners' input. Whether or
agree
not
that-
that needs to be captured here, I think we could choose not to, but I think that's where we need to go.
And I think the goal would be all those are aligned, right? So it's like, here's the WIO component, here's what state government can do, here's what outside partners can do in terms of like, it's everyone's piece of that pie. So I don't know, maybe that's something we just write strategic plan ? And
like,
back to, or I can email Rick, maybe some suggested language for the next time we go through this, so we don't wait
and I think it's something.
15 minutes like.
Right.
Yeah, but it's like-
Executive director with the new state workforce
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
And work on and make a proposal.
Oh, yeah, we don't have to say what's in it. We just say like that they
Right.
have a strategic plan that they are carrying out and reviewing every so often. And then they can.
And that it be aligned.
Yeah.
With the other strategic plans so that we're all working in sync.
Well, and I think part of this is a language thing, right? We named the Office of Workforce Strategy
Mhm.
and Development. We've talked about a strategic plan for the board, which is really internal to the board. Like, what is our work plan for the next 2 years and next 4 years? It's almost like that's a work plan rather than a strategic plan. Whereas I think about a strategic plan being more about big picture strategy, future oriented, multi-year down the line,
Yep.
that's directional. The workforce or the operational side of things is the work plan of
Mhm.
what is the board going to do over these next few years to then execute on
Right.
that strategic direction.
Right.
So maybe there's just some
Certainly.
languaging stuff that
Yeah.
we could work with to help clarify, because what everybody's been clamoring for is the vision, directional, strategic direction, strategy type language.
Mhm.
And so I just think
What
we
if
should figure out how
We
to.
could say Kendall and Ellen to collaborate on strategic plan language. Does that sound okay? Like, in two sentences or less. And send to Rick if that
Yeah.
sounds agreeable, and then for us to then review on our next.
That'd be great.
I think that makes sense because I go back to earlier discussions in the room downstairs where you're sort of saying, we need a lens through which to view all of these funding requests. And if we have a strategic plan that's broader than the
That's another
board,
way. Yeah.
they all feed into that, and that's what helps make decisions.
And that's what the metrics should be connected to.
Correct.
That's the big
Right.
picture
That's
outcomes
what I was.
that we're trying to
That's.
accomplish.
That we're all
Yep.
looking.
And so under WIOA, I know they're very specific, but do they have specific metrics for you to look at, or is that left up to?
We have negotiated performance targets, and the Agency of Education in their Title II program has a set of targets, and Higher Ability has a set of targets, but they're about number of people served, wages, wage growth. So
Outputs, not outcomes.
Got it.
Which is why having the connection to the chief performance officer is so key here, because it helps to get up an elevation to around the outcomes we're looking for.
So 6, no changes. 7, Cameron, you had put comments there, and I also added a comment. The facilitate effective communication between the business community and public and private educational institutions. My question is this an appropriate role for the ED, or should it be twice there, housed within the DOL or the in-house with the service providers themselves instead of the ED? And Cameron's comment was about the inclusiveness of the colleges and universities.
So is this in some ways what the talent pipeline management effort is in attempt to accomplish, in essence, by doing the kind of work that they do with employers and then translating that to the educational institution? So is that what we're trying to capture here, that function? Because the other one is, it is limited, right? It's just a business and educational institutions as opposed to all the other nonprofits that are in the system, those kinds of things. So is that the intent?
So this is current language.
Right.
Yep.
And it is currently under the Department of Labor. My assumption is this is a kind of, we owe a thought of, there should be communication between business needs, talent development, talent pipeline, et cetera, to entities that are then potentially providing that education service to accomplish those needs. That's my assumption. I was not here when this was added. And so to the extent, I think both for this bullet and the second bullet, I think my comment, Rick, may have been more on the second bullet, but I think it's part of the conversation that we were having last, with the vice chair and Senator Clarkson here about just being prescriptive and limiting it to public and private educational institutions for what purpose? I don't know that there is one, if there are other entities that should be involved in that conversation. So that are, providing that service as well.
I think for what purpose here, I mean, we changed what's the purpose of the inventory. So now let's get into what's the purpose of this communication between business and education institutions? Is it about students getting jobs? Is it about making sure that the education institutions are providing the right kind of training for the businesses? I think it's
Isn't it all of that?
It's a both and.
Yeah.
And, we, Department of Labor, have some connections with business, but we're not having anything to do with that communication.
Just need to add the what for, where we just say, so facilitate effective communication between business and education for pipeline development and job placement.
Beautiful.
With that.
Yes.
I don't know if that
I like that a lot. And I also think about like, what does that capture like an adult basic education that's working with GED? Like people aren't going on to education, but they're getting training. Is that broad enough to capture that? Because those are grants you guys. Yeah.
I think so. It's not specifying that it's secondary or post-secondary. They're just public and private educational institutions. So as I read it, I would interpret it as that universe of providers, whatever it is.
So Vermont adult learning would be considered an institution, then that would be captured.
Right.
As long as that's captured. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great addition, Kendall.
Thanks,
Love it.
Good.
Love
This is the new number 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, seven.
What is the
Quite
function?
confusing.
Right.
For communication's sake.
Are we doing it if there's no function?
Should we just add where your cursor is pointing?
Yeah.
Business there?
Business pipeline?
Well, are we talking about creating, are we street pipelines? What kind of pipeline?
Employment, workforce. I don't know.
I think it's pretty clear, but we can be, but,
Yeah.
Oil.
That's right.
Cameron, what about your top, this is the comment.
It was a comment. I think it was from the commissioner, and I just was trying to make notes
But
of the
it's-
document as we were moving. And I think his point was more of this should just be a general expectation that we're doing, but
It's a good point though.
I recognize the point of wanting to specifically call it out.
Because right now it's just between the business community and educational institutions. It's not between state agencies and departments.
Well, the ED would, facilitate it and,
Right.
um,
And so does that open it, I mean, is it facilitation between?
Business, community, state government,
Right.
and public, private. I'm okay, it's up to, I don't know, the state, I'm kind of looking at my partners here in terms of what your everyday, portfolio looks like, Jay and Cam, but does state government need to be in this line? Because again, if it's really the business community saying, in a year, I'm gonna need 300 engineers. And then, then facilitating, okay, hey, trainers and education institutions, do you have an engineering program? There's gonna be need for engineers.
I think
What's-
the why here for the executive directors, so that they have an insight into what is or isn't happening, and then that can feed up to their strategic plan or
Right.
whatever.
Right, so the ED is doing that, but like commerce or labor doesn't necessarily need to be involved in the like, hearing from Beta, they need 300 engineers. Hey,
But-
CTE center or.
It's a team
Yeah,
effort
yeah.
from the
TSU
state and
or-
local level of
Okay.
like, what resources can the state bring in to
Mhm.
solve this
Right.
employment, this lack of a workforce problem, and then what can the local
Okay.
schools do?
I think that's happily the coordination
Mhm.
that needs to
So
happen.
it'd be business, community, comma,
Right.
state government, comma, and public and private education institutions. As appropriate? For the-
That's your phrase of the day.
Well, in this one, like, we don't train engineers as state government, right? So there's like no, you know what I mean, like in that one anecdote I just gave, like, we wouldn't necessarily need to be in that feedback loop because none of ACCD or DOL's programs are engineering. But
Yeah, but I don't have.
But I think we have an economic interest in being at the table for that
yeah,
discussion, and can pull in, you know, we have the ability to research what other states do and bring examples, and but it's not always bringing financial resources to bear. It's
Mhm.
technical assistance and
Yeah.
that sort of stuff that we can
Okay.
help the situation.
Chairman Cott, I've got my little hand up in the corner somewhere.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
go ahead, Adam.
Thank you. My comment on this would maybe address what Kendall was, because I was thinking that part of this was missing as well. Would be that but communication between the business community, public, private educational institutions for the distribution to across the system for the purpose of pipeline development and job placement. So referencing the fact that the executive director is collecting this information to then be shared across the system, which captures the state government piece of that. So it's doing two things. It's saying go have effective communication, but then do something with it. So it's the purpose of pipeline development, but it's also, you have to distribute that information to the system at large in order to have that pipeline development and job placement be effective.
And that could be distributing to private entities as well that are
The dissemination of the information
Yeah.
across the system, something
across
to
the
that
system.
effect.
So we're talking about everything.
So Adam, are you suggesting adding dissemination of information on number 7?
or would it be its own number, more broad than? Cause I could see other times we want to disseminate info too, right? Like I'm almost wondering if it should be its own standalone, like disseminate important information across the system for, I don't know, maybe what we're thinking.
Yeah, it does tend to get a little long on this one by including all of that, but
So
I applaud the fact that this effective communication is in there. I think this is a real strength of this position as it's being created, is to be the communicator of the workforce system. And therefore you need to be effective communicator.
So why don't we just, Rick, just put something off to the side and we'll let Rick work with it. And he can determine whether we need another 8, 9, or 10, if we need to add a 10 to this. Then he can wordsmith it and figure it out. I don't want to take his job away from it. Is there any place where local government would be part of this as well?
Local school districts, but I mean. in
Well,
education.
no, but I'm thinking, does Burlington, does South Burlington, any place, that, you know, Chittenden, especially Chittenden County, do they provide any type of dollars or, you know, infrastructure, whatever it's needed to provide workforce development. And so I'm just wondering if we need to say state and local government.
You don't they, do they help? Their local property tax would pay for the CTE in their communities?
The city of Burlington has a person who does workforce development, so they apply, the city applies for grants from us sometimes. Rutland, the RDCs sometimes play that role too.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
because
that's already, that's through state government, but I'm wondering if any of the local government, if they have put any resources of their own towards.
Yes.
It hurt to put local in there, local and state government. Irrelevant.
Make a difference where local is. No,
I mean, probably so first.
that's what I would advocate.
All right, should we keep moving?
Yeah.
Now I'm getting stuck
Let's go.
I'm looking at
Let's go.
pipeline. You got me stuck on pipeline because the chair said, what kind of pipeline? I can't stop looking at it. He has kind of a point. Do we need to be, not that it's gonna be gas or oil, but do we need to say, workforce talent?
Yeah, this is
Special.
Edie. I have workforce pipeline that I was just gonna email to you, but I think workforce
Okay.
pipeline
Okay.
unofficial.
we know what it means.
Okay, then we have 8. Coordinate intentional outreach and connections between students. And we have marked out graduating from Vermont's college and universities and employment opportunities in Vermont.
I like that change.
Do we need to include anything else? Okay, I'll resolve your comment, Cameron. Okay, deleted 10 because we incorporated 10 into 5 above that design and implement criteria. The new 9, with the assistance of, we crossed out all those specific secretaries and just moved to all agencies and departments and with other relevant stakeholders, develop and implement a coordinated system to recruit, relocate, and train workers to ensure the labor force needs of state government and Vermont businesses are met. So the red underlines are new language, suggested language to discuss.
Okay, I'm sorry that I'm gonna bring us down a rabbit hole here, but if we're going to include state government and then Vermont businesses, do we also need to say like nonprofits and, yeah, and
businesses.
But aren't nonprofits businesses?
Yes, they are, absolutely.
They're considered a nonprofit corporation.
No, they're considered businesses.
They're
I'm sorry.
All right,
I think
all right,
businesses
all
are
right,
profit, nonprofit.
All right,
Hold on.
all right, I'm with you,
Businesses.
great.
Businesses removed and employers are
Vermont employers.
placed instead of. business.
Employers are met.
Employers?
What if we just say of Vermont employers are met, and that would include, in theory, everybody?
Yeah.
State government and businesses, public, private, and
I-
nonprofit. If we just say Vermont
I just,
labor.
but I get worried that we tend to not think of state government
As an
As a-
employer.
huge employer in the state of Vermont.
I do every day.
I know you do. But when we have these discussions, you know, I mean, in my committee, we try to make sure that we're talking about state government as well. There's needs there as well. So I don't want to forget about the issues that we have in state government and state government workforce. But
Of which.
But now that doesn't work though, because again, state government is an employer. So if it's a state
It is,
government
but-
and
And
Vermont employers, I feel like
And
we can go
all-
back to
And
businesses.
all employers, can't we just say all employers?
And other, no, because now it looks like state government's the primary focus. Which, oh, like, again, I love it, like, let's do it, but I just, I think it looks weird,
well,
I
what
don't
if we say
know.
Vermont employers, including state government?
Sure, that would work for me.
Where appropriate.
I just don't think you guys would be very happy if the executive director comes in and has been like, I've been focused on state government exclusively for the past 6 months,
And then
because it was
points to
listed
that.
as an option, right, like it's number 1 in this.
Can I
Okay.
take us down a different rabbit hole in this? I have a question on the word relocate, because for me, the transportation issue isn't necessarily about relocating a person permanently, but it's making sure that the transportation needs are met to get workers from where they live to where the work is. And I don't know that that's covered in here.
That's
I bet the relocate was really connected to
to.
trying to attract people from outside Vermont.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Because
outside.
that's an existing language. I'm sure that's what our train of thought was at that time.
Yes.
It still is.
Then perhaps another word, right? So because we're talking about a coordination of agencies, and I know we have workforce, in certain areas, and empty jobs
Right.
in other areas, and no
Yeah.
way to get from one.
Yeah,
Right, that's true.
That to me would be a different item,
Mhm.
because Edie, you're talking about getting workers transportation to a job site that they're not close to, is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that
Not in this, but
belongs here.
yeah, because a thought train and relocate is different. Well, it wasn't, because if I remember correctly, when we were talking about this, it was bringing workers into the state. But it was also having the opportunity to move people, if they so chose, to work from Bennington to Newport or whatever, if the job opportunity was there. But it was more for.
So so again, I'm not gonna push on the word relocate. I'm just gonna ask, is this job the person who should be coordinating? And
We lost you.
I, to Edie's point, maybe I see this in the same way that I see the work that the executive director would do with the Commissioner of Labor. I'm doing my work as the executive director. There are these issues that are related to you, Commissioner. And under this item number 9, since it's about all agencies and departments, this executive director would go to the Secretary of Transportation and say, am doing my work. These are some of the issues. Can we have a discussion about how to make this work? So it's about, number 9 seems to be about that coordinated system to get people to fill the available jobs. But I think then we get into, what about transportation? What about housing? What about childcare? And it kind of quickly becomes are all of these, well, they're relevant concerns to the workforce, are these things that this executive director role should be
Primarily focused on.
primarily focused on?
yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay, my internet is back. It's been a little spotty. Makes sense, but I also think highlighting that is important, and that's the person or the people, right, who can do this statewide are the ones who will be hopefully able to say there are lots of open jobs in St. Albans, there are lots of workers in Burlington, there's no public transportation to the other. How do we
Yeah.
fix that?
So
yeah, and I think to your point is that they're working with V-Trans. And how can we provide that working with the business? I know that's been done up my way.
What if it was, okay, so the ED is going to work with other relevant stakeholders and all agency departments to develop and implement a coordinated system to recruit, relocate, train, and place workers to ensure labor force needs are met. Is that still too broad? But that's where I'm like, if it's, the job is in St. Albans, for example, and you
Well,
live in,
I mean,
but I don't.
I think it's a little micromanaging. I mean, I think that this is part of the job of the executive director is to work with businesses and make sure that we are locating businesses and places that we can get workers to. I mean, I'm a little concerned more, but that's part of the coordination job.
Would it,
Isn't it?
I think so, but this, right, the way this is worded narrowly is focused on recruit, relocate, and train. And I wonder how it would be if we removed recruit, relocate, and train workers, and instead it said, develop and implement a coordinated system to address the labor force needs of Vermont employers, including state government. And then it's broader.
And the ED can come up with a plan that
And
does the
right,
relocate, yeah,
because it's speaking to all other state agencies and departments.
I'd be fine with that.
Mhm.
I think that's good, because then that's
Yeah, I
the,
agree. That
So
covers-
Jay, develop and implement a coordinated system to,
To address the labor force needs of employers, including state government, and then our Met would be,
just remove our med.
yeah. And just how this relates to the current set of goals for the workforce board and the Wiowa State Plan, there's specific call out to housing and infrastructure and childcare, and so there's a nice nexus.
The effort of time, I will provide my comments. Writing.
You're definitely broadening the task of the ED. And that's,
My very brief comment is, if we're then subsequently narrowing this back down to something like that, I don't understand the difference between that and 1 and 2. We're already establishing and managing an integrated system. We're already coordinating across public and private to identify and address labor force needs and
Yeah.
ensure workforce development information is easily accessible. So I feel like we're duplicating if we're removing some of that and broadening it. And, I do think, and this is where for to Kendall, those are just my personal thoughts. We have spoken about one of the biggest challenges we have is getting people here into the state. And the question I would have is, do you want to call that out as a specific job of this position if they are the Office of Workforce Strategy? I mean, it seems like that is a very critical piece that you may want to call out specifically. I agree with Representative Branning and the point that she's also articulating that could also mean in state. It doesn't have to be always out of state, but
I think this is, we need a big plan. Relocating people, bringing people in, you know how I feel about that program. I love it. So, but Randy Brock tired. Really, we could. So, I know you hated it. We love it. We love it. Because we need more people, and we need a variety of people, not just people who could have. Anyway, won't get on that. But I think that really we need to leave some stuff to our new executive director to add, and I think that's a perfect thing to have in our strategic plan for a year or an annual priority or whatever. I'm not sure it belongs here.
So then would that number 9 go away, given what you said?
Yeah,
Again, I would not.
I agree with both of you. Like, I would at this point just strike number 9 if that's the path we're going down.
Yeah,
The numbers are so
circle back to
murky,
it
I can't
with
see
the time
them.
that we have here, but
And then 1
I
and
think it
2.
really becomes a question of
Well, it becomes
Can believe-
duplicative. I agree with you, Jay. It becomes duplicative of 1 and 2, and then I agree with Senator Clarkson that we want the ED to weigh in on like what should be the
Have you
focus
thought that?
and what's the order of operations.
To me, that's kind of a priority, like, we have an objective of relocating 20,000 people to the state. And this is how we're gonna do it, and this is our plan for the next 3 years to do that. It's just, to me, that's like a work plan, to go to Ellen's differentiations between work plans, strategic plans, and whatever else plans we need, life plans, lunch plans.
Okay.
Okay, 9 is deleted. So then this becomes 9.
Okay, so then this gets harder. and
Last
harder.
one. So ensure has been changed to support
Right.
the state workforce development board in carrying out its duties and responsibilities as outlined in section 541A. So just kind of nothing major there, but the word ensure kept throwing me off.
Well, it's hard to accomplish. I mean, you can't always accomplish it. But you can support it and have it as an objective, but then COVID hits and you can't ensure anything.
So I will say that I think the department, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong here, the department's position on this topic in particular in the past has been, there are federal program requirements that the Department of Labor should have some sort of arm's length away from. In particular, it's associated with the requirements and functions of the board. And we run into issues, or have in the past, issues may be a strong word, but we're currently in the situation where we have a federal review that we're going through right now, and we have findings associated with the operation of the board. A simple one, which I thought was great, is there's a finding of, I can't remember if it's a finding or an area of concern, but there is no board because we're in the process of reappointing, right? And so that's understandable, but it's just, in theory, from our perspective, someone in the state needs to be the one responsible for ensuring those things are done. And from our perspective, that becomes the executive director.
Yes.
Because it can't be.
Because it can't be the chair. You're not gonna, we can't go to the chair of the board and say, hey, you're
It's
a
not
private
a
citizen,
volunteer.
fix these findings,
Volunteer.
right?
Like, let's-
So just, we feel or have felt, and I don't know if this is a hill that we care to die on here. I think we can work with whatever the language is, if it's gonna be what Rick has proposed, but it's just, the executive director is really, in our mind, the one who is responsible
accountable for the
who is
board's-
accountable for the state.
The board's mandated functions.
Right.
So, but again, I don't.
So let's maybe come up with stronger language around that. So now that we're clear on what your concern is, I
So
think
is it
that's.
this, is it, well, this whole thing is.
Is he responsible for?
Yes,
carrying
responsible.
out?
Mhm, in consultation with the State Workforce Development Board. Or well, with the support of, but it's,
So that's the issue
Well-
that we've run into is, and Rick, I shouldn't speak for you,
No,
but
no,
it's
no.
just, you have an executive director and it's how do you, it's the board's job. How do you say that this person is forcing the board to do what's its job? So I know that that's the kind of rub that we've run into.
Yeah.
From my understanding, Rick.
Right, that you want them to ensure the board actually does its job.
So currently that's the Commissioner of Labor, right? That's ensuring this.
Right.
And technically he'd be accountable. Theoretically, maybe is the word I should use. If,
He is
If-
under WIOA, right? Cause it,
Well, so that's not current language.
is it not?
I don't believe so. And again, this is where we've somewhat run into issues in the past, right? So in the beginning, when WIOA was kind of transitioning over, there's a requirement, for example, to have a one-stop operator. There's someone who's supposed to be operating a one-stop system. The Department of Labor has filled that role for a long time. Recently, we've been able to contract for an actual or an entity. The issue we run into there is if the Department of Labor is the one-stop operator, we're ensuring that the Department of Labor is meeting its requirements. There's an inherent conflict there. And so we've
Yeah.
tried to kind of step away from that role and ensure that there's a third-party entity that is filling some of those obligations. So it does become a challenge again, where we're currently sitting, where the department is ensuring that the board's meeting its requirements, but the board actually oversees part of the department.
Right.
So it's
So-
it's a conflict.
I actually think we could go back to ensure. I feel more comfortable with that now. And go back to ensure, because otherwise you're doing responsible twice.
Mhm.
Because you could say is responsible for the state workforce development that they carry out their duties. But I think I feel comfortable going back to ensure here, at least as a draft to get us further along. Now that I understand what that,
And for transparency, based on our conversation we had, you know, I think it was a few weeks ago, we did add help ensure in that section. I'm personally not crazy about adding that word. That's just me. I'm not a member of the committee, but just to make sure
Right,
I'm
no,
being
no, we did
transparent with the
ensure.
conversation that happened.
I would just do ensure.
It should be is instead of in then.
Yeah, right.
And do we should
Carry.
ensure that or is it just ensure is carrying out its duties, right, and responsibilities as outlined in section 541A of this chapter? I think
I
given,
hope I'm speaking.
No, you are, that's
Yeah.
what the US Department of Labor said is you have to have a firewall between our programs at the department and Agency of Education and Hireability and the work of the board and the executive director. So there's a clear line of the board is overseeing our programs, we're running our programs. In a larger state, I think it matters a whole lot here. It's can be a little confusing, but this helps to clarify.
yeah, but actually,
And so I did not get to F1.
Yeah, can we jump in?
Sure, if you wanna.
Yeah, so just on this, this was, you know, we had quite a bit of discussion, you know, the last time we met. There was discussion about wanting to make sure, as the senators mentioned, you know, earlier, that any reports that are required are going to be both, you know, comprehensive and looking at the whole system, but also valuable. And so we did have some proposed edits here. One of them was potentially making it a biannual report. One of them was potentially adding in that it would be, we originally had December in here. I think December may be current language. So we had talked about changing, oh, it's right there, sorry, December 1. So we had talked about changing that to February 1 instead of December 1. I think there was discussion about, you know, there's if you're wanting it for calendar year basis, wanting to make sure it's incorporating policy development, like giving us enough time, you know, the commissioner mentioned, like, we're not going to put any policy recommendations in a report that's due on December before the governor has the opportunity to, you know, do the state of the state and the budget address, et cetera. You know, we're not going to undermine the governor by kind of promoting policy before he's had the opportunity to do so, he or she. And so then there was some other language here that I could share my screen if you want me to, but ultimately a takeaway was I think we need to go through and kind of look through our Title 21 and if we're wanting to incorporate our reports, making sure we're identifying those. So
yeah, because
all that's to say, I think there's some work we need to do to help incorporate for you all some changes to this language, so.
I can.
I do think, I'm sorry, Kim, I do think it should be earlier than February 1 though, especially, because if we don't get a report till February 1 and then it takes
Right.
everybody time to read the report, think about what they want to do with the report, the session's gonna be over and like the drafting deadlines and everything will be by. So I'm almost like leaning towards the tradition. We can keep it December 1 or January 15th, but one of the kind of usual dates. We've been able to thread that needle in the past where a lot of times, like I'm thinking when we had an opioid coordination czar, Jolinda LeClaire, like she had a report, I think that was due to us maybe like November 15th. And there was an array of policy options in there. And we were able to be like, this is actually helpful. Now let's think about what we can afford, what we can do.
Right.
Again, I'm not gonna die on the hill over any certain date, but I am, unless it's that just administratively, like the timeline it takes to pull all this information together, which is a lot. And I do appreciate that February 1 would be give the best quality report, I think we could do an earlier date.
So I think the reason that the department, we need feedback from the department and whoever else has that information is when do we get the data fed, when do we get some of the data that we would need to incorporate into this?
So good
And-
question, too.
Yeah, and so we can't have something that we're wanting to be comprehensive and thoughtful and actually with a lot of priorities identified for the upcoming year if we don't have, I mean, I don't want to put the cart before the horse.
And that's why I think maybe moving the date up is totally fine with us. Kendall, I don't think we're, wed to February 1 by any means.
When's the
I think
VDOL
not.
report due? Like, when's your VDOL report due?
Currently, we have
December
some that are
13.
due in January, some that are due in December. Yeah.
But it's like that one, if it's gonna be incorporated.
It's currently in December. That is
That
the,
was
that is current
that's December
statutory language.
15th.
But I will say that, irregardless of whether you're looking at December, January, February, the challenge that we're going to run into is we will not be able to release fourth quarter wage information until, as you know, Senator, we get Matt in and it's like, yeah, you're usually not gonna get that until like April. So, I mean, it's
Very
just a
frustrating.
recognition that is how the system works. And so, employers aren't even required to report fourth quarter wage information to us until January 31st. And so then we have to take that information and we have to Matt has his own federal requirements before that information can be published, et cetera. So that's just the reality that we will always be stuck with.
And basing a recommendation on third quarter results so that we get it up a little to improve our timeline. Third quarter results are incomplete, right?
No, the
Right.
third quarter should be fine. It's just, so it's a biannual report based on the recommendation here. And so it's an understanding that we'll be able to look at, for example, if we were reporting this coming year, right? We would be looking at full calendar year 2023 data, but we're only going to be able to provide wage information, for example, up to the third quarter of 2024. But irregardless of where you put the date, that's not going to change.
Right.
No,
I
that's just
think
the
that's-
reality of when the information comes.
It's a rolling 12-month situation, like,
Exactly.
So
one quarter is
then-
not gonna make a big difference.
So then, given that, what else, I'd just be curious what other data is coming in that could parallel the third quarter, the end of, so if you take data from the third quarter, what else will have come to you by that? What else is due to you by when? So that
That's, some of the other things depend on when we issue a grant and when the grant ends, if it ends.
so that
December
we control
31st.
those.
We can control the dates of the grants, but there may be some limitations. And I would include that in a report. We have, I'm making things up now. We have 5 grants that end on December 31st. Those grants are not included in this report. When we had the discussion about this report, we were talking about, we already have to do federal reports. Federal reports are aligned with the federal fiscal year, which ends on September 30th. And so
should we be thinking about aligning things with the feds if that's already acute? It strikes me that makes some sense. And then we would have a full, maybe a proposal and a report due December 1st before, if you're aligned with the feds and you've got everything in by September 30th, did you say, or the 1st?
September 30th. Yeah.
Right, so if we did a month later, would that make some sense?
It would reduce effort, I think, trying to clarify in this report that this section of data is about this period of time and this is about this.
I think we want to be as consistent and thoughtful about your time and the time that we get the data and the time we have to align with the feds. I mean, it strikes me that we could do some helpful alignment and reduction here.
I think
I mean, it feels like going back to December 1st makes sense. If the
Yeah.
data is on the federal fiscal year, then you have to get your report in
Yes.
by October 31st, right? You have 30 days
Yeah, November
15th, something,
is 45
right? So,
days.
and realistically, you all are not really looking at reports in November anyways, most likely.
Always wait till after Thanksgiving.
Right? So then December 1st makes way more sense. to
Yeah, I
just
think
stick with
December
that
1st
And
from everything I'm hearing, makes a little more sense. That gives the governor and the legislature and hopefully you, that is helpful.
you're not having to recreate, like create yet another report. It's like you're just using the data and information you already have. And the executive director needs to be thinking about what they want to add to that.
The only thing you won't capture are the state grants that where you've asked for a December 31st deadline for stuff. But going forward, we might align all of this so that you have it in and due the same time. For an earlier period so that we can get it all in the same time frame, same metrics, same data, same time frame.
Could we do, I mean, if we're what could we do it December 15th to align with when that Department of Labor report is currently due, if it's gonna be included? You guys said that one's currently due December 15th.
I want to hold my final thoughts only because I need to go do more.
Okay.
Yes, you wanted to look at more
Okay.
at the time frame.
Ken, what I'm saying is that current report is December 15th, but recently we added an annual apprenticeship report,
Mhm.
which I think is due
Okay.
January 15th. So I think that
Okay.
one's due separate. And what we've talked about is, as we kind of got on the screen, wanting to make sure we're being comprehensive and inclusive and not having multiple. So that's where I want to go.
Productive.
I want to go match.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
So can, again, I thought with this executive director that once they're on board, they're gonna look at this whole system and come back to us with recommendations on making changes to make alignments with reports and everything else. Maybe that's where we need to let that happen before we start tearing everything apart and looking at everything and trying to do it ourselves. We're hiring somebody that we want to do this and analyze the whole system and come back to us. Well, I think we want to stay up here, not down here. As much as possible.
I agree. The only thing is that the likelihood of getting anything from an executive director is not going to happen until sometime in 2026. And so you still want to have something
Right.
in
Yeah.
2025.
But when
given to
we're
you.
talking about like the apprenticeship
Yeah.
report, that's now, I think that's what we want to tell the executive director is to look at all the other reports that should be part of this comprehensive report and come back to us and tell us what they are and how do we need to align them to this date.
To that in the comment I was gonna make, Mr. Chair, your point is, there's other agencies involved when you're wanting to look at the umbrella of workforce education and training, in particular, even just under WIOA, there's Agency of Education, Hireability, et cetera. We haven't spoken with them about this at all, so. And that's why for me, it's kind of like, this is a key piece, I think would be if we were to want to make any changes, it's probably something to come to you with language during the session in particular. To the point of not wanting, you still want stuff this year, right? And in 2025, so it's just this is one I think potentially take the longest to try to figure out.
Yeah.
But you still have February in there.
Yeah, we'll go.
I'd get rid of
February.
February.
Go back to December.
That's right.
Yeah.
Keep in
Take
mind,
it back to
anything
more
that-
productive.
Right, and then
yeah.
changing, but
Anything that changes is not gonna affect this year, right? We will
Yeah, and
still have our report due this
Yeah.
year.
So I was typing up language that the work group Cameron was a part of added last time we met. That was not in the version that I sent over. So it's 11:51. Maybe we can read this language and see what you all think about it. So the report covers the previous 2 calendar years, which means biennial.
Yeah.
That's also up here, adding the word or changing it to biennial. The report shall include identification of system priorities, need for future funding requests, and identification of proposed legislative and administrative changes. The report shall summarize performance and outcome information submitted by federally funded workforce development and investment programs for all public and non-public programs.
And there was information that was added to try to make it a little more
Yeah.
Right.
It should-
clear what was looking for.
It should say the report shall summarize performance and outcome information submitted by all federally and state funded
That's what I was-
Yes.
workforce
Yeah.
development and.
Yes.
Because of everything above we're talking
Yes.
about.
Don't I see federally and state funded?
He just.
I just added it.
Yeah.
It's so fast, you know.
But jeez.
I forget. So I gotta do it.
Look at the eye.
Okay, I want to see if I can think a thought and Rick has already got it.
Oh, yeah.
So the one thing, just, sorry, at the beginning is, it doesn't say at the beginning of the biennium, does it?
No.
So it needs to say that. So we want to make sure it's at the beginning of a biennium, don't you think?
Or
You can say starting in
In starting,
January or
Twenty-
December 1,
2020.
2020.
Or the 27 at that point.
20.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even numbered year. No.
No, it's
No.
26 because it would be, that would be,
26.
Is the next
it would be for
election year.
26 to begin for the session 27.
Yeah. So December 1, 2026.
So I think we should say that because we're hoping we'll have something obviously to go with for this year, but I think we want to start at beginning. Yeah.
Wouldn't you put that like at the end? Where you. The effective dates?
Yeah, that's better than
Yeah,
putting it
right.
here.
Yeah, because that's what, you don't want this in the green books, you just want it in the session logs.
I've seen it in green books, but
Yeah, I
it's
know.
clean, it's cleaner now. Let me add a comment there.
But I want to make sure we clarify that because of otherwise it would be due this December 1st. Which
So
might be.
I apologize. I have another meeting at noon. I already texted to say I'll probably be a few minutes late, but I don't know.
I need
I
to.
don't
I was gonna say, I don't know, we're about 5 minutes from that, so I don't know if we want to make this a stopping point, especially
It's a good
because-
stopping.
Yeah, I agree, because it looks like it's actually the last like track change, and there's just maybe 2 other comments from Cam that we can reconcile at
Yeah,
the next
right.
meeting. Is that okay?
And then everything else is forward.
Everything else is the board, and I don't know if Adam had additional thoughts on the board, but we should get all the additional thoughts on this section F and.
There's a thought process about the rest of that information,
Yeah.
but it's probably a rabbit hole I'm happy to talk about the next time we get together, because we really didn't.
Is it radical?
Did
Did you just say radical?
It's rabbit hole, sorry.
Oh, it's radical. I was hoping you
Which
would
can be
use
radical.
radical, and then we,
Can be a radical.
rabbit holes, but,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know, rabbit holes just imply
do we have,
derailing.
the next meeting on the?
Is this our 5th meeting, by the way, Megan? Do you know how many times we've met? It's either 4 or 5. So we have up to 8. So we,
I would be happy to meet sooner rather than later.
This is 5.
this is 5. So we have 3 meetings left.
And I stupidly forgot my date book, so but Tuesday mornings are good for me.
You don't want to do the 5th?
Oh. I'm doing my, tour Windsor District that day. Maybe the following Tuesday though, whatever that is.
12th.
Well,
I don't think I have anything on for the 12th, but I can check. What are people's lives like November 12th?
I could do 10 to noon.
You'll be in Puerto Rico, how wonderful.
Their
Oh, I'm
earliest
very
time to
jealous.
start
Well,
is
with-
10.
well, I was gonna say with Zoom and everything, you could just take care of us down in Puerto Rico, Megan.
Let's hope there's not.
Could.
But you're not going to.
I don't know if Wi-Fi would work on the beach.
Or if they've had another.
You can find a way.
There's no
You can
Wi-Fi.
find a hotspot somewhere.
Yeah, do we?
Is this,
I could do
Yeah.
10 to noon on the 12th. I don't know if that
I'm
works
good with
for
that.
others, but
Adam, is that okay with you?
It appears to work. for the
It
committee.
doesn't? Does it work for you guys?
Okay,
here's 2.
okay, let's,
10 to noon on the 12th.
Ellen, what about
Yeah.
you?
I think we're pretty close to
Oh,
completion, and then.
Yeah.
Then we wanna-
Jay, as you talk to Commissioner about this,
And then,
let us know if there's some proposed changes that you see that needs to be done, and we can circulate that around too, and we can hopefully get this finished.
And obviously, Rick, we also want to do a drafting request.
Yeah.
For both of us. I mean, just,
This is an official.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's an official chair, vice chair request.
Okay. Do you want one? Oh, I'll ask you later.
Well, we probably want one for both.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought.
right.
All right.
From left, just.
Okay. Okay.
Goodbye, Adam. See you around.